Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna. Amazing times we live in. Krishna. Let me just read a little bit from Bhagavad Gita. Song of God. Conversation between Krishna and Arjuna 5,000 years ago, heard by Sanjaya, disciple of Vyasadeva and advisor to Dhritarashtra, the blind king. So all three are hearing this message simultaneously, and we have it here recorded. Hare Krishna. Just before the battle, Krishna and Arjuna are seated on a chariot. Arjuna is very hesitant to engage in the warfare. And Krishna is explaining the supreme science of transcendence and devotional service to the Lord, and the different processes of yoga and elevation of the soul, and the duties that people have in life according to the modes of material nature. There's a lot in Bhagavad Gita. So this is chapter 2. What is on the back here? This is Prabhupada, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. There's a quote from Henry David Thoreau, famous early American philosopher. He says, "In the morning I bathe my intellect in the stupendous and cosmogonal philosophy of Bhagavad Gita. In comparison with our modern world and its literature seem puny and trivial." Well said, Mr. Thoreau. Well said. Okay, so this is text 33. And in this little section here, previously, leading up to this, Krishna was explaining the nature of the soul, how it's invisible, it's eternal, and can't be changed, can't be killed, and is transmigrating through different material forms, reincarnating, life after life, in the conditioned state. Now he's explaining about duty to Arjuna. And Arjuna is a kṣatriya, he's a warrior. And his duty is to protect and uphold law and order, defeat any enemies that are coming from religious purposes, to try to disturb the religious and civilized society, they're considered enemies. And so now Krishna is saying to Arjuna to give him all these different reasons why he needs to engage in this battle. So he says, atha tvam imam dharmyam saṅgrāmaṁ na kariṣyasi tataḥ svadharmam kīrtiṁ hitvā pāpam avāpsyasi. He says, if, however, you do not fight this religious war, then you will certainly incur sins for neglecting your duties and lose your reputation as a fighter. At that time, Arjuna was the most famous archer on the whole planet. His archery skills were unparalleled. They didn't just have, like, a bow and an arrow. They also used mantras that an arrow could be guided to hit a specific target and nothing else. There was different types of weaponry going on there. It was not just a stick with a feather on it and a bow and arrow. There were other things going on. And he was a famous archer. So here, the wars that we have today, they're not necessarily religious wars. They're wars over wanting more territory, or wanting the assets of somebody else, or you just don't like them because they're a different color or something. So these wars are going on for supremacy. But that's not what this war was. This is the Kurukshetra battle 5,000 years ago. It was a war on religious principles because there were those that were causing disturbance for the civilized society, the progressive society, organized in such a way as that everyone could make advancements spiritually. So that was the war. But still Arjuna didn't want to fight. He was in that position so Krishna could speak Bhagavad Gita and we could all hear it. Because Arjuna is related to Krishna. He's Krishna's friend. He's never in ignorance. But he's put in this situation so that we can hear. So Prabhupada's purport, the verse again, if, however, you do not fight this religious war, then you will certainly incur sins for neglecting your duties, and thus lose your reputation as a fighter. So one of Arjuna's arguments was, I'll be overcome by sin if I fight this war because my teachers are on the other side. I'd have to kill a teacher, I'd have to kill a family member, I'll get a sinful reaction for that. But Krishna says, if you don't fight this war, because it is a religious war and they are causing a huge disturbance on the planet, if you don't do this, then you will incur sins for neglecting your duties. So Prabhupada's purport, Arjuna was a famous fighter, and he attained fame by fighting many great demigods, including even Lord Śiva. After fighting and defeating Lord Śiva, who was in the dress of a hunter, Arjuna pleased the Lord and received as a reward a weapon called pāśupata-astra. Everyone knew he was a great warrior. Even Droṇācārya gave him benediction and awarded him a special weapon by which he could kill even his teacher, who was Droṇācārya. So he was credited with so many military certificates from many authorities, including his adopted father Indra, the heavenly king. But if he abandoned the battle, he would not only neglect his specific duty as a kṣatriya, but would lose all his fame, good name, and thus prepare his royal road to hell. In other words, he would go to hell not by fighting, but by withdrawing from battle. So he had the support of demigods, of great military instructors. He had the blessings of everyone. And if he walked away from this, then not only not doing his duty, but it would be shame, terrible shame, because he had everybody backing him, even Krishna. So text 34, kīrtiṁ chapi bhutani kat ayasyanti te vyam sam bhavitasya chakirtir maranad atirichite. Sanskrit. Scholar I'm not. Translation. Krishna says, people will always speak of your infamy, and for one who has been honored, dishonor is worse than death. Prabhupada's purport. Both as a friend and a philosopher to Arjuna, Lord Krishna now gives his final judgment regarding Arjuna's refusal to fight. The Lord says, Arjuna, if you leave the battlefield, people will call you a coward even before your actual flight. And if you think that people may call you bad names, but that you will save your life by fleeing the battlefield, then my advice is that you'd better die in the battle. For a respectable man like you, ill fame is worse than death. So you should not flee for fear of your life. Better to die in the battle. So now Krishna is speaking as a friend. He was giving philosophy and teachings, and now he's just speaking as a friend. Better to go into the battle and die there than to walk away from the battle and have people calling you ill names and scorning you, and it would just be terrible for you. That will save you from the ill fame of misusing my friendship and from losing your prestige in society. So Krishna, would reflect on Krishna, because Krishna is Arjuna's friend. And this would reflect on Krishna. If his friend and student poops out on this, and that reflects on Krishna. So the final judgment of the Lord was for Arjuna to die in the battle and not withdraw. But we know Arjuna is not afraid for his life. We know that necessarily. He's not overcome by fear of dying in the battle. So the next verse, text 35. Vayad ranad aparatam mamasyanti tvam maharata yesham cha tvam bahumato utvayasya la gabam. The great generals who have highly esteemed your name and fame will think you have left the battlefield out of fear, and thus they will consider you a coward. It's not fear, Arjuna, afraid. It's not fear. Well, it is fear, but not for himself. It's fear of what it might do for everyone else. And then again, he does say he's afraid of sinful reaction. He's not afraid of dying. He's afraid that he would be fighting inappropriately, and then he would get reaction, sinful reaction. So it's not like he's afraid to die unrelated. He's just not sure if this is a reaction-free engagement, if he's doing the right thing. Prabhupada's purport. Lord Krishna continued to give his verdict to Arjuna. Do not think that the great generals like Duryodhana, Karna, and other contemporaries will think you have left the battlefield out of compassion for your brothers and grandfather. They'll think you have left out of fear for your life. and thus their high estimation of your personality will go to hell. Prabhupada says. Text 36. Acharya vadam cha vahun vadishyanti tavahita nindantas tava samharkyam tato dukataram nukim. Your enemies will describe you in many unkind words and scorn your ability. What could be more painful for you? Short purport. Lord Krishna was astonished in the beginning at Arjuna's uncalled for plea for compassion, and he described his compassion as befitting a non-Aryan. That's a civilized, advanced society is Aryan society. Now, in so many words, he has proved his statements against Arjuna's so-called compassion. Text 37. Ato avāpsyasi svargam hitvā vabo yase mahim tasmat utishta kamteya yadaya krita nishchaya. Krishna says, O son of Kunti, either you will be killed on the battlefield and attain the heavenly planets, or you will conquer and enjoy the earthly kingdom. Therefore, get up and fight with determination. This is Krishna instructing on the level of varnashram dharma. He's not instructing as yet on the level of devotional service. When he begins to explain this other level of devotional service, then Arjuna becomes motivated. But simply on the level of varnashram dharma, it's my duty, I'll go to heavenly planets or I'll enjoy the kingdom, it's not motivating Arjuna. He doesn't care about those things. But Krishna is saying like this, because this is on the level of varnashram dharma. You do your duty. So Prabhupada's purport, even though there was no certainty of victory for Arjuna's side, he still had to fight. For even being killed there, he could be elevated into the heavenly planets. That's on that. Prabhupada explained there's two levels of service in a previous purport. One level is according to the qualities one has, what kind of body and qualities it has, Brahminical, mode of goodness, kṣatriya, mode of passion, vaishya, mercantile activity and agricultural activity, cow protection, and then laborer class, and according to the qualities one has taken birth with. So one has to act according to those qualities, and it can make advancement according to the varnashram system. So this preaching that Krishna is doing here, he's speaking to Arjuna on that level. Your duties, the qualities that you were born with. Even if you don't fight here, you'll have to fight anyway because it's your nature. So he's speaking to him on that level. Text 38. Sukha dukkhe same kritvā labha labha jaya jaya tato yudhaya yujaspa imaṁ pāpam avāpsyasi. Do thou fight for the sake of fighting, without considering happiness or distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat, and by so doing you shall never incur sin. Hayagriva was a college professor, disciple of Srila Prabhupada at this time, and he majored in poetry. I believe he was a PhD in poetry or something. He had some degrees in poetry. He was a professor. And he's responsible for a lot of the poetical and So you can see it here. The word for word could be done in a very kind of matter-of-fact way, translation. But here, this poet, Prabhupada liked it. He really liked it. Because it's a song of God. It should be poetic to hear on the ear. So he's, do thou fight for the sake of fighting, without considering happiness or distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat. And by so doing, you shall never incur sin. So it's captured very nicely. Krishna. Prabhupada's purport. Lord Krishna now directly says that Arjuna should fight for the sake of fighting, because he desires the battle. There's no consideration of happiness or distress, profit or gain, victory or defeat in the activities of Krishna consciousness. Everything should be performed for the sake of Krishna is transcendental consciousness. So there's no reaction to material activities. He who acts for his own sense gratification, either in goodness or in passion, is subject to the reaction, good or bad. But he who has completely surrendered himself in the activities of Krishna consciousness is no longer obliged to anyone, nor is a debtor to anyone, as one is in the ordinary course of activities. It is said, this is a verse from Bhagavatam, 11th canto, anyone who has completely surrendered unto Krishna, Mukunda, giving up all other duties, is no longer a debtor, nor is he obliged to anyone, not the demigods, not the sages, not the people in general, not kinsmen, not humanity, not forefathers. That's the verse. So Prabhupada continues, that is the indirect hint given by Krishna to Arjuna in this verse, and the matter will be more clearly explained in the following verses. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Because Krishna wants it. There's the tipping point for Arjuna. Oh, you want it. Oh, okay. Without considering anything else. Heavenly planets, kingdoms, sinful reactions. Hare Krishna. Relatives, kinsmen, humanity. Save the whales, save the turtles, save the goldfish. Hare Krishna.